Chris, always good to see you, and thanks for coming back on the pod with me this week.
Chuck, it's good to see you. I feel like we're in the same room.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Well, only what, an 8 hour time difference and a few thousand miles apart, but yeah,
yeah, but I think when we have so many commonalities, it makes it easy.
I agree. I agree, and it was great seeing you. I have to tell you, it was great seeing you when I was out in September. You took us through your ad Vivum cabs. We tasted a couple vintages, which was wonderful. I mean, it's just an amazing experience. I was with my cousin Eric Stuyvesant,
Right.
who you met. Good year for you. How would you sum up the 2023 harvest? Focusing on ad Vivum, this Cabernet Sauvignon that you've been making.
Well, it was, as you've probably heard, it was a late harvest by by present day standards. For a lot of us, I'm going to put myself in the old timer group here. I've got my first vintage. Really was, well, 1980, if you count my internship at Louis Martini, but first full year as a production winemaker, 1984. I mean, in the 80s and early 90s, it was sort of the timing we were all used to. We made Cabernet in October, not September.
Okay.
So there's a lot of anxiety, on the part of younger winemakers, like, oh, it's so late. I wonder if we're going to get ripe. But the weather turned out to be phenomenal, and the cold nights really kept acid. Really, just that natural acidity really present. So the wines are fresh. They have extraordinary color. And, thankfully we had that extra time because some of us had a little bit later bud break. And, it was a cool season. And as we know that from experience, those long, cool seasons are the best. And actually at Vivum, we harvested October 12th, which, probably a week later than average, but kind of in our little window where we like to be. And the wines they've got a couple different lots, or they have that freshness of an earlier season, okay? Because we didn't lose that acid thanks to that big diurnal variation and those cool nights. And it's very, we make 100% Cabernet at Vivum, and so it's a very Cabernet. There's that little bit of a savory note, and kind of, I don't know. It's very complex wine, very deep, and very generous. So I think a lot of people are really talking up the 23 season. I think it's still a little early to be saying it's like the vintage of the decade or of the millennium so far, but it's clearly very good quality. And I think I'm very pleased, and quantity was good too.
No, that's great. When you say quantity, how many cases were you able to produce?
We're always under 500.
500 cases.
Just
Okay.
under 500 cases, yeah. Yeah.
And you've been at this, you mentioned you've been at this for a while. So, back in the 80s, early 90s, you're picking, say, in October as opposed to these days in November, although 2023, talking to certain winemakers, they weren't done picking until the end of November. So is it cyclical? Is it due to climate change? I mean, you mentioned like a late bud break this year. I mean,
Yeah.
is this going to go back and forth where you're picking early, you're picking late? How's this going to play out?
It's an existential question, and it's really hard to it's a great question, but it's hard to answer, really. I noticed, for me, I was at Camus Red Winemaker there in 1999, and that's when I noticed a shift. And it was rather abrupt, frankly. 98 had been kind of cool and a bit rainy, and long season. 1999, we picked my favorite block of Cabernet for Camus on August 31st, which was, I mean, I just could not believe. I was pinching. It was hot, and I was just pinching myself, like, what is going on here? And that really started a trend that I think, we're waiting for the same stuff every season. We're trying to to lose most of those pyrazines that make the wine smell and taste green, overtly green, and we're trying to get tannins that are ripe and give us the structure and the elegance I'm looking for. Been looking for the same thing ever since I started, and that really started in Bordeaux in 1982. My where I cut my teeth really, and in 1999 it just came so early, and then it's been this has kind of been a trend since then, actually, for like 30 years. Things we have to wait longer in terms of physical maturity. So that at a higher brix, we have to wait for a higher brix, generally a slightly lower acidity, higher pH, to get the same stuff. The same. It's hard to put it into words sometimes, but those ripe tannins and so on. The physiological maturity, we might say. We have to wait longer for that. So 2023 is sort of like Back to the Future, or back to the past, I guess, because it felt to me more like just the whole evolution of the season. We got a little rain, and frankly, a lot of us were just ecstatic about that little bit of rain, because you've probably been here during harvest, and you know how dusty it gets. And man, it just cleaned the vines off and gave them a shot in the arm. And things had kind of been stagnant a little bit in terms of evolution, and then brixes started to move, and more importantly, the tannins started to ripen after we got those little rains. I forget when that was, but it was it was around Labor Day. So
okay, so you got a little bit of rain as opposed to, say, heat spikes the past few vintages. Then
yes, yeah, we didn't really. There was very minimal heat. In terms of, regular heat, but not those spikes that we've been accustomed to.
Okay,
so there was,
yeah. Oh, go on. There
was nothing pushing us to harvest before we really wanted to. There was no external sort of forces working on us to force us to harvest.
Okay,
it became a question of style, really.
Okay.
So I picked relatively early. Yeah, you mentioned some people weren't picking until Thanksgiving. There was some picking that happened just a week before Thanksgiving. And it's going to be really interesting to compare notes with colleagues. I'm having lunch with Todd, for the winemaker for Dominus, today, and we haven't caught up since harvest. So it's going to be. I want to hear his take on it. They tend to harvest a bit earlier, as you know. I was at Dominus for many years, and anyway, it's just I'm looking for elegance. I think I could speak for Dominus too. Looking for elegance and complexity over like big extract, and big alcohol. Yeah, and it's more. You could call it the Bordeaux approach, but it's really just it's a fundamental stylistic decision.
Okay, and talking about this cab of yours, 100% cab. Look, you took us through a couple vintages at your tasting room there, or your office in St. Helena. The wines are fresh. They obviously have great aging potential. So tell me about this wine. What's the origin story? What does ad vivum mean? How'd you come up with this?
Well, that was I bottled the first vintage in 2007. There was no label. There was nothing on the cork. They were shiners, and you're just starting out. You know how it works, and eventually you want to sell that wine and start to recover your investment and go on, not just as a with the passion of winemaking, but actually to have a viable, sustainable business. So clearly I needed a name, and I think I shared with you that I was hit by lightning.
Yes.
In 2005.
While in your office, yes, correct.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't in my office when I was hit.
No. You told me the story.
When I told you,
office.
Yeah, but I had been out with Boy Scouts. In fact, one of my son Josh's younger brothers was with us, and 7 of us were approaching. We crossed the Sierra Nevada range, and we were, just a day and a half from going over Mount Whitney onto the Nevada side, and big 90-mile trip, and it was an extraordinary trip. And we got caught in a lightning storm, and 7 of us got hit. I kind of have come to believe all of us might have passed away, but 5 of us came back. We lost 2 of our team, and it's sort of one of those, and it's a whole story in itself, but the sort of one of those life-changing things. If you let it be, so just to distill it right down, I knew when I named my wine that it had to give homage. It had to, really express the importance of life as our greatest gift. So how could I do that? I've got a friend who's really a block away from my office here, and he's sort of a Latin scholar kind of guy, and we started tossing around some ideas with Latin. And I've always been kind of taken by Dominus, Opus, and other Latin-derived names. So we came up with Vivum, which it's vivere, to live, and then vinum, wine. And if you meld those 2 together, you get Vivum, which for me, my definition is it's where the place where wine and life meet. And then "ad" is a little connecting word in Latin that implies an intentional desire to go to that, the word that follows. So to go to that place where wine and life meet. So ad vivum, strictly speaking, it means to me to go, or to want to go, to be going to the place where wine and life meet, and then acknowledging that life is our greatest gift we could possibly have, and that wine used in an appropriate fashion, it may enhance your life. It may have that ability. So, and I earnestly believe that. Anyway, that's sort of the origin of it, and so it's sort of, and then there's the symbol on the label, which denotes, it goes back to the Kabbalah and ancient Mesopotamia, ancient cultures, and it's a symbol of life and fertility. It's constructed of circles. If you remember, like a spirograph, it's composed of all arcs from circles, and it's sort of a timeless symbol for really the what's at the heart of life.
Well, it's a beautiful label. The story, I remember when you were in your office and you're telling that story. I mean, a powerful story. I mean, 7 people get hit by lightning. Unfortunately, 2 don't make it. Which is really sad. And like you said, a life-changing moment for you. I mean, that's a powerful story. That's a game changer. I'm just curious. It gives you this, I guess, this passion to live and to appreciate life going forward. And I'm just curious, did that experience kind of change your approach on how you made wine as well? Did it have an impact on you as a winemaker and your wines?
I've never been asked that precise question. So thank you for throwing that. I don't know if it was a curveball or a fastball. But I think I'm going to have to think more about that after this conversation too. But I think in a way, it sort of heightened my focus on winemaking. Even maybe, who knows, maybe I was sort of clinging to winemaking as an avenue to that was related to nature, and I'm a lover of nature, and being a winemaker enables you to spend a lot of time outdoors, and for me that's really valuable. I mean, that's what I was doing when we got hit by lightning. I was on a 9-day outdoor experience, and so I think it may have heightened, as I think about it here, just my connection with nature, my connection with because vineyards, yes, it's a sort of an interruption of natural things when we plant a vineyard, right? if you think about it. But it is we have to, respect and work with the environment, and it's conducted outdoors. So maybe I think there's something there, something in this. Winemaking is really at its source a primordial sort of effort, and yeah. And so was I escaping by, I don't know, but I think just focusing. I prefer to say I focused, and that if anything, the whole lightning thing made me want to be outdoors more,
Okay.
which might
Okay.
which might be counterintuitive, but so I
Well,
don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, I threw you a curveball and you hit out of the park, Chris. I mean, I love that. I love that answer. I mean, an amazing story, and you're fortunate. You came through that. When you launched Ad Vivum, I mean, obviously this was a side project. Who were you making wine for at that time?
I was actually at Swanson Vineyards,
You're at Swanson's. So
focused on Merlot of all things,
on okay,
Yeah,
focus,
yeah.
focus. You're at Swanson, focused on Merlot. You've always worn two hats. So when I had you on the podcast with Philippe last year, you're the winemaker at Inglenook. You recently retired after what, 7-8 years at Inglenook?
Seven,
Why
7 years. Yeah.
7 years? Why'd you step away from that role?
Well, first of all, I would consider myself more of having been the coach, especially these last few years, kind of coaching the younger team, which is very capable, and I know it's in really good hands right now. Inglenook is destined for great things. And Philippe Bascol from Chateau Margaux, of course, is still the director of winemaking. He retains that title at Inglenook. Comes, sort of every other month. So he doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But I just got to a point where, I mean, I'm of a certain age, I would say, and I've 40 years and four different wineries. Um, I just want more time for my own projects. As you know, I also work closely with my son Josh on his winemaking ventures, and I enjoy that increasingly. I would say just the collaboration. And so I have at Vivum, he's got Grounded Wine Company, and then our crossing the bridge that really connects us somewhat now is our new Coil brand. We're
Yeah.
making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay under the Coil brand. It's small, but is pretty fun, I would say. And so that's kind of our, I don't know. It's a little more lighthearted than Vivum. It's I don't know. It's not cab for starters, and I spent my career mostly around Red Bordeaux varieties. So
So a new challenge, but plus you get to work with your son. I got your son Josh, Grounded Wine Company, coming up on the podcast. So let's shift gears just very quickly. This new project, Coil, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. I take it now you're on the other side of the mountains. I'm assuming you're in Sonoma.
well, actually, yeah, the genesis of the project was in 2018. We have a good friend, Roger Scamenga, who is up and has a history he's been around for a while in the wine world, but he owns a vineyard in Anderson Valley, so Mendocino. Okay.
Oh, Mendocino. Okay.
Yep. It's and this vineyard is on Signal Ridge, and it's Signal Ridge Vineyard. So that's on the Mendocino Ridge AVA, and it's an extraordinary place. You can actually see the ocean from there. It's over 2,600 feet elevation, and it's bear country. There are bears there. I've seen the evidence.
Wow, that's cool. So Pinot Noir, Chardonnay from the Anderson Valley.
Well, no, the Chardonnay comes from Petaluma Gap.
Okay, so sorry. So
that is Sonoma County. That's Sonoma County, Sonoma Coast,
right?
And it's in the Petaluma Gap. That really where that cold air is funneled through there. Super nice vineyard. It's owned by the San Giacomo family.
Okay. All right. So you got the Chardonnay coming from the Petaluma Gaps, Sonoma Coast. Your Pinot coming from the Anderson Valley. what was the first vintage? What did you roll out Coil?
2018 with
20
the Pinot Noir. Yeah.
2018 for the Pinot Noir. And Coil, what's the story behind Coil?
Well, in case you didn't get it, I'm kind of into this name thing, and it's really hard to name a wine.
Yes, it
You
is.
know, it's a challenge. Anything you think of, someone's already using somewhere. And so it came actually fairly easily in retrospect. But so Coil, we're starting to use the term more now in English, and it's very common in Bordeaux, and I'm speaking with colleagues there. But the idea of tension in a wine.
Okay.
I mean, in English, in American English, a lot of times tension, evokes something that's negative. And
yes.
there is a negative aspect of tension. Like if someone tells me, like, hey, you're really tense, that's not good, particularly. But so the idea of tension, for me, I think, it's used sometimes in common parlance in French and in English, I think. Whether you're talking about a musical composition, a piece of art, or a wine, or even our conversation right now, if there's something about this thing that elevates it from like a, okay, something not too notable, but okay, to something that you're going to remember and that somehow has deeper meaning and is maybe even exciting in a way that you might want to return to. We could say it has tension. So that and then that led me to, okay, did you take physics in high school or college?
I took a semester in college, yes.
Okay. Well, I bet in physics, like me, you learned that when a spring is compressed, you create potential energy, and then when the spring is released, kinetic energy is the result. So imagine when you put a wine in your mouth. Do you think sometimes there's a release of energy, and could you maybe call that kinetic energy? So the tension in the, you know where I'm going here.
I follow you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is something pleasing, or do you we've all put wine in our mouth, the quaffable wine, and it's fine, and you have a few glasses, it's fine, but you if you ever have that wine again, like, well, okay, or I could try something else. Nothing was particularly
memorable.
notable.
Yes.
Memorable, yeah. So it's just something that elevates. And a lot of times tension is associated with acidity and freshness in a wine. But for me, it goes beyond that. Tension is what really keeps a wine vibrant and alive. And then the other significance, and on the front label, there's a coil, and coiled sort of artistic touch. And I think of the cycle of nature that is part of grape growing and winemaking. So right now the vines are dormant. They're mostly lost their leaves, or being pruned. And the cycle that leads up to harvest next fall. So sort of acknowledging and celebrating that idea of seasonality and cyclical aspect of nature.
Awesome story. I like that. Coil, tension in a wine, but at the same time, I guess if you're right, tension can connotate in the United States something negative, but I guess if somebody's feeling tense at the same time, they could unwind with a bottle of Coil, right?
That's good. Yeah, well, I might have to use that. I'll give you credit.
Awesome. No, awesome story. And I like these stories that evolve from, a concept to actually packaging something and bottling something and something that you can enjoy. So very cool. Coil, you're working on that project with Josh. Chris, let's get back to Ad Vivum, this 100% cab of yours. What's the model? Are you sourcing fruit? Where's the vineyard? Where are you picking the grapes?
Well, it's like a lot of things in life, it's sometimes you just stumble across something and it all sort of comes together. And in 2005, I started working with a vineyard called Reese at the time, and it's the southernmost vineyard in the Yountville appellation. So you think that, I started out at Domino's 1984 as the first winemaker there, and that's at the northern end of the appellation. I'm also on the Mayacamas side of the valley. But Reese was pushed right up against the Mayacamas, whereas at Domino's there's sort of a separation, and it was immediately caught my attention. At the time, since 2005, I'd been making experimental wines, not commercial wines, with my friend Larry Bettinelli, who had purchased this vineyard and had replanted it, still called Reese or Reese Ranch, and it's an extraordinary site for a vineyard. And one thing led to another, and we ended up crushing, actually at Swanson, a couple tons of this fruit from the upper part of the vineyard that's protected from that searing afternoon sun we get that can occur between 3 and 6 p.m. And by virtue of being so close to the Mayacamas, it's buffered, that's mitigated, and your grapes are protected. So I made wine in 2005, 2006 from what became Sleeping Lady.
So this Reese vineyard became the Sleeping Lady vineyard?
Yes. So
okay.
I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but so after 2007, I actually had still called Reese, okay, and I get this. I've got at the time I used to cold soak, and I've got this processed Cabernet cold soaking in a tank, right? And I was probably the moment that I've been the most excited about, crushed fruit. The smell of the juice when I popped the top of the tank, I'll never forget the smell that came out of that tank. And then looking at the juice, tasting the juice, completely unfermented, and being so transfixed that I persuaded Larry to sell me that crushed fruit so that I could make a commercial wine. And of course, my son Josh had been pushing me to sort of, Dad, you really need a retirement plan. You don't have one, and I'm going to start making my own wine in 2007. You're going to help me, and it's my senior project in college, but I'm in in real time. You're going to be helping me actually do it, and so that was going on, and I started, it just kind of all came together, and then Larry was a good enough friend to sell me that crushed fruit to make the first vintage of what would become Ad Vivum. So it's still called Reese. And I think in 2008, it may have still been called Reese, but Larry took me out one day and tried to tell me that, it's like end of the day, don't you see her up there up in the Mayacamas? And I did not see her, but he became quite emotional, telling me, don't you see her head and her shoulder and her legs and her, and his kids had all been born nearby, and they lived there. And so when I come home at the end of the day, I feel like this Sleeping Lady has taken care of my family all day while I was gone working, and he's kind of crying now, and I'm like, well, Larry, it's okay, it'll be okay, buddy, and I'm still trying to see that, and I just don't see it. But I started really kind of putting the screws on him after that, like, Larry, you really should call this vineyard Sleeping Lady. And eventually he did. This is sort of a bottle of wine story we're condensing here, but and by virtue of putting it on, it was originally on the back label, selling it in and out of state, I enabled him to trademark the name of the vineyard, Sleeping Lady. And it has become quite an extraordinary vineyard in terms of, there's a lot of famous winemakers making wine out of there now, but I was the first to do a vineyard designated Sleeping Lady wine. So.
Awesome story. What's the size of that vineyard? How many acres?
Oh, I always forget, but it's about 50 acres.
It's about 50 acres. And is that something, obviously, I guess you have contracts in place, and you did about 500 cases of Ad Vivum. And obviously you want to keep that tension of the wine, the consistency, the quality. Are you able to scale a little bit? Are you able to grow that business?
Yeah, but I don't currently have a desire to do that.
Okay.
I think I'm in the sweetest spot at the vineyard where I get my grapes. And I'm not, I don't know, I'm not in my 30s anymore. I'm really not trying to prove anything. Sure, I could probably stretch it to maybe I could make 1,000 cases, but I really don't want to.
Okay.
Everything, I feel like I've got exactly the fruit I need at that vineyard. I'm not looking at other vineyards at this time. And it's sort of a natural thing because I get that question a lot, but I'm just not highly motivated. If I was my son, and maybe when he takes over at some point, he'll want to expand it. But I'm a sole owner, and yeah, I do all the work, but I reap all the benefits, and it's going very well. 2023 has been our best year, I think, for sales ever, and we're just sometimes you reach just sort of a steady state, which is actually one of my son Josh's wines, is his Napa Valley Cabernet. But I love the name, but it's sort of this steady state, sort of equilibrium, if you will. And I've just sort of come at that point in life where it feels good, and making it twice as big, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't feel as good.
I'm just curious. So there's about 50 acres. You say you're like in a sweet spot there, like like an analogy, like you got a sweet spot on a tennis racket. You're in a happy place. I guess soil types, microclimates, this all contributes to this wine's sense of place then.
Yeah, and I don't consider myself to be an oracle when it comes to, knowing where the best vineyards in the world are, but and maybe I would imagine you have too, set foot on many different vineyards, and I've lived and worked at Chateau Petrus, and I've been to many great properties. But I get a certain feeling when I step onto a property, whether it's planted or not. But we're talking about vineyard right now, and when I step onto that, especially the upper section of that vineyard, which is the sloped, really the true bench part, the bench that comes off of the Mayacamas there, at the southern end of the bench, the northern end being in St. Helena, where I'm talking to you from right now, is the best land. And I just get a feeling. I'm not just making this up to back into why I have the greatest wine in the world, Well,
you have a connection there.
I have a connection, and I think there's a connection to be had. I communicate that connection through my wine. That's what I'm trying to do when I make Ad Vivum, is to kind of connect the dots from what I feel when I'm standing in that block, and to the person drinking, enjoying Ad Vivum from the bottle. I know it's a little out there, but I think other people have said the same thing in different ways, but there's something particularly special about that site.
Yeah, well, I mean, love the name, sleeping ladies on the Sleeping Lady vineyard is on the label. How much time does it spend in oak before it's released? Oak bottle, how much time does it spend before it's released into the marketplace?
Well, it spends 18 to 20 months in barrel, so it's in bottle for 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah, we won't release we didn't make a 20, which I believe was the right call, but that's not true for everywhere in the valley. 2020 we made some really great wine at Inglenook. I think it just depends where exactly you were and how the air moved around you. But 2021 won't be released until spring 2024.
Right.
So that will have been 18 months or something from bottling. So
and where, I mean, look, it was fantastic being in your office there. You tasted us through some older vintages, I think maybe 15, 16, 17, and you felt the tension. They're still young, still beautiful. Where can somebody buy these Ad Vivum cabs?
Well, you can certainly, it's easy to find Ad Vivum sellers online, or you can, Chris Phelps Wines is the the umbrella. You can Google that, but advivumcellars.com is where we have a store on our website. My phone number and email are right there. Anybody can contact me. And then we do work with a broker or a distributor in New York, Florida, and California. A little bit in Florida, but very small volumes. So there is some mostly on premise activity in those states, and not that much retail. But we sell a pretty big chunk of our wine direct to consumer. So, and we're pretty easy to find online.
Okay, large percentage, yeah. DTC. I got another question for you. You've given me like a sense of place, your overall, approach to making wine. You got this, connection to this vineyard, and I guess this incident, this lightning strike back in 2005, that maybe gives you like a renewed lease on life, or in terms of like how you want to live your life. The way you approach Ad Vivum, making that wines, and obviously for 7 years you're making wine at Inglenook. Do you have a different approach when you were at Inglenook and making those wines to making your Ad Vivum wines? Is that, can I ask you that question? I mean, same philosophy, same approach, or slightly different because you're in two different places?
Yeah, Inglenook, I would say, Dominus, Inglenook, and maybe throughout my career, I think I've really come to believe, and it's not an original thought, that wine is we're clearly making Napa Valley wines here. And for anyone who says, I'm trying to make Bordeaux in Napa Valley or something, is kind of disingenuous and sort of for me not a workable premise. But I believe wine is a beverage that we make for our enjoyment. Do we want to impress the critics? I mean, of course, all winemakers say, yeah, I really want to impress the critics. But, I think you're really selling out if you make, and, as you know, it's been a trend for so long since the 80s, really, to try to make these big, bold, highly extracted alcoholic wines that, yeah, they can be really impressive. And you and I have probably both been impressed. Wow, that wine is amazing, But could you drink a bottle of it? Not that you need to. I'm not trying to encourage people to drink a whole bottle of wine, but by God, you should want to. If you're using that wine appropriately, as I said earlier, or you're it's you're going to restrain yourself at some point. But I think it's a beverage that it's for enjoyment, and there should be refinement and elegance. And whenever we say the word drinkability, we sort of get like, well, that's not serious, to a wine. But no, I think there has to be an aspect of drinkability. Otherwise, what are you doing? So I like to say that I'm really lucky to have had spent a total of a couple of years in Bordeaux, and then been there dozens of times. Really focused on, I was at Dominus, but even after, when I was at Camus and Swanson, I still made at least one trip a year. It's Bordeaux is kind of a touchstone, because I think they don't really talk about this aspect of how wine should be made, but it's so obvious that you just get it, and there's wines in Bordeaux that age decades, and they're not these big blockbuster, and they have their share of those now, of course, but I think there's plenty of room to make, but it takes some restraint, see, how do you make your wine? What are all the details? Well, there's things I do, but there's a lot of things I choose not to do, and so whether it was in Inglenook or at Ad Vivum, like, this restraint and kind of avoiding extremes, in terms of, you don't want to pick, too acidic and, too low of a potential alcohol. You don't want to be at the other end of the spectrum either. when you're while you're monitoring extraction during maceration, when are you going to drain the new wine? There's a lot to be said for that. That's the second most important thing to when you pick. So,
Okay.
but it really Inglenook dovetailed very nicely with my own philosophy. It was, of course, Philippe is like a very intuitive winemaking genius, I think, and having his it was just sort of we understood each other right away, and I think he was the one who really ferreted me out and welcomed me to Inglenook in the first place. And I think because we had conversations like this, and there was really no disagreement about why do we make white wine, why do we drink it. I mean, if you really analyze it, it's not. We can make it super complicated, but you should want to enjoy the wine you're making.
You should want that second glass.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's cool. Looking back, Chris, let me repeat this. Looking back, Chris, who influenced you the most and helped you become the winemaker you are today?
I've been really privileged to have some great mentors, and there's Mike Martini, who we lost this a year ago or so, was the winemaker when I was my first internship with Lee Martini, who was sort of the first kind of a brilliant guy in his own way. With his mind could work on different levels, but he instilled sort of my initial enthusiasm, passion, curiosity for wine. But then when I went to Bordeaux, and Christian Moex became a mentor, and but it was really his winemaker at the time, Jean-Claude Berrouet, who made 44 vintages of Chateau Petrus and many other wines for the Moex family. His oldest son is now the winemaker there. He still consults, but he and it wasn't really some of his like use words if necessary. He sort of, when we tasted wines together, or we're trying to decide on harvest parameters together, he was very gentle and very surprisingly open-minded, with a clear objective in mind, but still kind of a creative. Because of course I got to blend wines with him over the years while I was at Dominus, and it's kind of like when he meets a wine. I really saw this when he would meet a person for the first time. Really trying to give that person a chance, not sort of, sometimes we can be very dismissive of someone. Your first impression maybe isn't the best, and you just, I'm really not interested in this person,
Yeah, right them off. Yeah.
Which is really not the best approach. Some people that maybe didn't make the best impression are my best friends today. So, and why not have the same approach with wine? Whereas a lot of us technicians, because we're also wine technicians, winemakers, I'm an enologist. You can sort of, like, if there's a little bit of Brettanomyces or something not perfect about the wine, you can just write it off. But like a person, wines are multifaceted, and he's sort of in this way, this analogy with people. Again, he didn't ever express this to me in words, but it's just observing how he moves through the world. He was a guide in terms of wine and grapes, vineyard, but also people. So, and then I went on to have later mentors like Chuck Wagner at Camus, Robin Leal, who was one of Christian's original partners at Dominus, and others. But I think Jean-Claude kind of sticks out. So I started a long answer there, but
yeah, no, but you've been very fortunate. I'm just curious, how'd you get that? How'd you land that job at Petrus? How'd that come about?
Well, I was I'd finished. I just went to Bordeaux to do the last year of the enology program, which was an extraordinary experience. Really tied together a lot of things for me. Davis, I kind of came out of Davis not being sure about how a lot of things worked, and but I really it was an amazing year-long orientation by going to school there. And then I had 3 interviews for internships. I decided to stay at the encouragement of one of my professors to do a vineyard or a vintage internship. And Moex offered me a 5-month internship, whereas the others were, for sort of 4 to 6 weeks. And so I was supposed to be at Chateau Petrus, which they didn't tell me. But Christian Moex, I said I'd get back to him of all things. I mean, you don't say that, And
I'll get back to
anyway,
you.
and so I was actually my fiance, now my wife of 40 years, was with me and at the interview, and then we went, gallivanting around Europe for, I don't know, a month or two. And when I came back, I figured, well, probably 6 to 8 weeks from harvest, I better call those guys. And I had sent them a postcard to accept the internship, which they didn't get.
They did not get the postcard.
No,
okay, lost in the mail. All right.
And I don't know that Christian's going to start Dominus. I don't know that they wanted to put me at Chateau Petrus. I had this 5-month internship offer. Decided that, well, that's pretty serious. So I called, and Jean-Claude I had to repeat my name. He said, "Oh yeah, we really wanted it. You were like our number one choice. We wanted to put you at Petrus, and now it's not possible. And in fact, all of our 12 chateaux there's no room for you." He said, "But we really would like you to work with us. Call me in 48 hours." So of course I called him to the minute, and 2 days later, and he said, "Well, as I said, there's nothing with our properties, but if you'd like to run the winemaking at a large chateau in the Poussy-Saint-Emilion, satellite appellation, this is yours. There's no winemaker there. You'd be all on your own. 40 fermentation tanks. I forget how many acres, but a large property." And man, it was. And of course, I accepted. I had no other options because I'd sent postcards to refuse the other 2 offers. I don't know if they got them. And but it was like, in retrospect, sort of a trial by fire. But when you're 20, in your mid-20s, you can work 20 hours a day, and I had lots of energy, and it was thrilling to be really running this place by myself. A lot of times at night, I'd be there completely by myself, doing lab work, cleaning things up, pumping over, just kind of around the clock. And then at the end of the internship, Christian proposed that I be his first winemaker at Dominus, and that's how it worked out.
Amazing. Number 1 draft pick by Chateau Petrus, right?
Yeah.
you said, "I'll get back to you," though. But then, yeah. I mean, in terms of that internship, really opened doors for you then.
Oh yeah, and it was. I still like to say that 82 was a remarkable vintage in Bordeaux, as I'm sure you're aware. And they thought I was this, because Jean-Claude Barrouet and Christian Moex used to come over, to this kind of modest winery and want to taste through all the wines on a regular basis. Well, they were buying. The arrangement was for them to buy most of the wine in bulk at the end of the season. So it was in their interest to have someone there who could take care of things, because there was really no winemaker, right? And the wine turned out super good, I guess. I still have a few bottles of that 1982 that were bottled at the chateau, actually, the wine they kept. And but I never had the nerve or the desire to remind them that it was just a great vintage. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. Yeah.
Mom third did.
Yeah. Anyway, but that was just right place, right time. Spoke French, and yeah, and then so that's why I'm really here today. That really gave me a jump start on my whole career.
So. Where are you from originally?
I was born in San Luis Obispo, so Central Coast.
Okay, all right.
But we moved when I was an infant to Livermore. So Some of our first friends were the Concannon family that at the time owned Concannon Vineyards, and some of our family's good friends. And my parents made homemade wine, so they'd get Cab or Zin from Napa Valley usually. And I don't know how they pulled that off, but that was really my first exposure to winemaking.
So Dominus puts you in Napa, and you stayed. You just stayed.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to be in Napa when we were graduating in 1981 from UC Davis. Heidi Barrett was in my class and others, and Randall Graham, right?
Yes.
So Randall, he was doing I think a master's master's or PhD, super bright guy. And I believe he finished in spring of '81 as well. And he said, I'm going over to France to get some cuttings. I'm going to start something. Just remember, you should be in Napa, because Napa is the Mecca, buddy.
That's cool.
He said, you could start there and you could go anywhere you want after, but maybe if you go somewhere first, you won't be able to get into Napa. And that was just his take on it. But it was probably pretty good advice.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I had the intention to be in Napa anyway, and this whole thing just worked out,
Yeah, no, that's great. Everything fell into place for you. I didn't realize Heidi was in your a graduate class at UC Davis. I had her on in
Yes.
season 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's great. She's great, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. No, that was
remains a good. Yeah.
good friends. No, that's cool. You've been in Napa for a while now. How has Napa changed over the years? What's the biggest change in the valley since you started, making wine in Napa?
Well, I've got a friend who likes to say, has been here as long as I have, that back, in the '80s, when you're going down Main Street in St. Helena, you could not tell who was a vineyard or winery owner and who was just a worker, because everybody dressed the same, looked the same, drove the same kind of vehicles. And now it's pretty easy to tell.
Okay, okay.
It's pretty easy to tell. So there's kind of like this. It's a little more of an elite deal here. I mean, still, obviously the vineyards are still here. The soil hasn't changed and all that stuff. So it's a little more of an elite culture here, which sometimes nostalgic for the older days when it was a little simpler, I guess.
Okay.
But what hasn't changed, and another thing that has really kept me in the wine world is the collegiality of the whole thing, because I can call, like I told you, I'm evaluating this wine as we're talking today, that I do a tiny bit of consulting, but I did for someone in 2023. And if I had a problem with this wine, and I think if you think you know everything, you're delusional. And if you can solve any problem, you're delusional. You need to reach out to colleagues. And I tell young winemakers this all the time. Don't think you have to act like you know everything. Be humble and reach out to your colleagues. First of all, make sure you have good colleagues around you. And we really lean on each other. And whether it's Heidi or Kristen Belair at Honig was in our class too, and others, I've just clung to these colleagues over the years. Bob Levy and lots of different folks that have been around for a long time, but even some of the younger winemakers, Peter Heitz at Turnbull, people that have been so kind and generous. Something goes, you need, hey, could you meet me and taste this? And what do you think? And they do the same thing.
No, that's great. You got a great network.
That still holds true. We still have this collegiality. And that's the glue for me that really holds things together. When you sort of place yourself above everyone else, maybe because your wine's more expensive or it's got more 100-point scores or something, I think you kind of lose out. If I think you could be at that point, but still be humble and really free with exchanges with your colleagues.
And generous with your time and support, I guess.
Yes, and mentoring the younger guys too. And that's kind of what I've been doing at Inglenook, is I said, kind of coaching those younger guys to come up, and they're gonna rule the world there, at Inglenook.
So who's I mean, obviously you got Philippe there at Pasquale as your director of winemaking. Now who's a day-to-day winemaker there? Who's taken over?
That's Jonathan Tyre.
Jonathan Tyre.
Yeah, and he's super bright and capable, and I know the winery's in good hands. And has been. He's been, kind of functioning day to day for a little while now, and it's and he's dedicated to the place. It's really nice when a winemaker. It's not just a job. It's you get the deeper meaning of it. And he, like other winemakers, is really has a love of the estate. And it's an extraordinary estate, kind of like I was describing Sleeping Lady, or if you walk in the Dominus Vineyard, Napanook. Napanook used to be part of Inglenook, remember, too,
Yes.
back in John Daniel's day. So, no, it's really nice to see young people who embrace some of the things that I've appreciated.
Well,
You know.
in addition to making great wine, you're giving back as well. You give back your time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I don't need credit for being a mentor, but I hope I've been a mentor to a few people. You know.
I'm sure you have. Chris, where do you like to go to eat in the Valley, say for dinner or lunch? Can you give a shout out to a couple of your favorite places to go?
Yeah, kind of. In fact, I'm meeting Todd from Dominus today at Cook.
Okay.
Cook is just a little tiny restaurant in St. Helena that's Jude, the owner, and his wife just do an extraordinary job there, and it's kind of, for Josh and I, it's sort of our, they're loyal to us too, in terms of they support our wines. But even if they didn't, it's just it's a great local gathering spot with excellent, Italian food. So,
Fantastic. Yeah. One more spot, give a shout out.
Yeah, there's a new place you may not even have heard of, but it's Charlie's.
Don't know.
Yeah, it's in the old Cindy's Backstreet Kitchen location.
Okay.
And over there on Railroad, so just around the corner from Main Street. And a young chef, Elliot, is the was a sous chef at the French Laundry. He's a volunteer firefighter here, and kind of has worked his way up, and somehow he's managed to, and he's doing it. He's kind of really. Philippe and I went there for dinner recently, a few weeks ago, and it was my first time in, and I think I'm going to be a regular at Charlie's.
I'll have to check it out. What kind of food?
I sort of, I don't know, somewhat original, I think. I'm not sure how to describe it, but I'd say, American, kind of in a way American, but with a French influence, sort of like at Vivum, I guess. Right?
Okay.
Or my approach to one, and maybe that's why it kind of works for me, that, it's classic American cuisine, but, with sort of the nuances and the complexities of maybe French cuisine. So.
Okay. Yeah. Have to check that out. Cool. Listen, Chris, always good chatting with you, seeing you. I appreciate your time. Before you go, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. I call this the Ben and Q&A. Give me the first thing that comes to mind. You ready to go?
I'm ready. I forget what they are. So you're,
yeah. What's your go-to quaffing wine at home this week?
Well, I would choose. Oh, that's a good question. I would choose between 2 wines. The first one that comes to mind is my son Josh's 2021 Grounded by Josh Phelps California Cabernet.
Okay.
It's just an easy drinking, quaffable wine. And then we only have, I think, 2 or 3 cases of that 2018 Coil Pinot. That's pretty darn good quaffable wine right now. So.
Okay, great. I'm just curious, go-to cocktail when you're not drinking wine?
Oh, I enjoy a good Negroni with my buddy Dan, or a good Manhattan with my buddy Jerry. So
two good cocktails. All right. What's the one vineyard you would love to own anywhere in the world?
Well, at heart, I'm a little bit of a right bank guy, and as tasty as it would be to own Petrus, that sounds audacious.
Okay.
There's a place next door called VCC, Vieux Chateau Sauton, owned by the
sure.
family. Guillaume, sort of the heir apparent to the winemaking, was an intern for us at Swanson, and is doing an extraordinary job. That's an amazing estate. And then they also have Le Pen next door, which is,
yeah, well known as well.
In my fantasy world, I would own Le Pen, which is a micro vineyard. The barrels they just have a few barrels. It's underground, and I would live upstairs.
Okay. Two
Way to go.
two excellent choices. What was the dream job as a kid before becoming a winemaker?
I wanted to be a doctor originally.
A doctor.
A
Okay.
doctor, but I put myself through UC Davis fighting wildfires, helicopters, and otherwise. Pretty exciting when you're 19 to 23, you know. And I thought after I discarded the idea of being a doctor, I was thinking about, you know, being a ranger, a forest ranger. And I have a great respect for those guys. One of them was our first responder for that lightning incident.
Oh, yeah, to rescue you guys.
Rob,
Sure.
and I've stayed in close touch with him.
Well, that's cool.
So, yeah, I love being out, love being outside, love being in the woods, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Back to nature. Very cool. Last one, Chris. Money, no object. Which bottle of California wine would you open with dinner tonight? Cannot be one of yours or Inglenook's.
Oh man, why'd you have to toss Inglenook in there?
Had to throw that in. Another curveball. You're not going to strike out though. You're going to hit this one out of the park as well.
Yeah, because I would have chosen the 41 Inglenook, which
okay.
probably
So
try.
1941 Inglenook. Okay, we'll give you that one. All right.
Yeah. And then oh man. Yeah, a little bit caught off guard there. I don't know. I would like to drink a bottle of 91 Dominus with Christian Lex.
Okay, fantastic. All
and
right.
then another one with Jean-Claude Barraway. So
okay. All
but
right.
that's one of the most remarkable wines I got to be part of during my career. So
3 excellent wines, well-known wines. Well, listen, Chris, like I said, always good to see you. And thanks for coming back on the road with me. First when you were at Inglenook, and now we're talking about at Vivum and your project Coil with your son Josh, who's coming up on the podcast next. Very cool.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time, Chuck, and just for your, you know, I don't know if passion's the right word, but just your, you know, your curiosity and your kindness and your openness, and conversation is always great. And I look forward to sharing a glass of wine with you soon.
Well, listen, I'm in Napa a couple times every year. How about you, me, Josh? We go have lunch or dinner at Charlie's. I would like that very much.
I'll put it on the calendar when you're coming.
Awesome. Thanks again.
You bet, Chuck. Take care. We'll talk again soon.